for both of the players, so didn't even know the other high noon was coming in. That's the idea. Graviton now going to be used, and Fissure is interrupted in his Earth Shatter animation, so he loses the ult.
The LA Valiant, the shipwreck that almost was. This team seemed dead in the water in the middle of the season, struggling with both on and off the stage issues, and for a short time were the biggest memes in this season, alongside the Dallas Fuel and Shanghai Dragons. But when all hope seemed to be lost, the Valiant reset, made a flurry of moves, took the stage with new determination, and somehow narrowly avoided the iceberg that they were clearly heading towards, coming out as one of the best teams in the league at the end of it all. So in this episode of Season in Review, we're going to be taking a look at the LA Valiant's highs, lows, and everything in between to figure out how the Valiant managed to pull off this epic turnaround. But first, let's find out where the Valiant started. The LA Valiant are owned by Immortals, an esports organization that has found success in games like League of Legends and CSGO in the past. While they weren't in Apex, Immortals did participate in early contenders, where they actually won Contender Season 0, only to come in a disappointing 6th place in Season 1. Nonetheless, most people knew that this team had a lot of potential, and most of their players were going to be picked up for the Overwatch League, even if Immortals didn't get a slot. The contenders lineup for Immortals included Envy, Fate, and Hyped on tank, Agilities and Grim Reality on DPS, and Verbo and Kariv on support. All of these players made it to the Valiant roster except for Hyped, who ended up dropping off of competitive Overwatch completely. To round out the team, the Valiant brought in Tank Numlocked from NRG, DPS Silkthread from Counterlogic Gaming, and the French DPS support duo Tsun and Unko, both from Rogue. They also signed the Flex Tank Space, who was ineligible to play until the mid-season due to the age requirement. This team had players with massive potential, and people were expecting good performances out of this team from the get-go. And perform they did. There was a pretty solid few weeks in Stage 1 where everyone thought that the Valiant were the best team that wasn't fully Korean. Fate and Envy worked together extremely well, establishing themselves as one of the best dives in the league, while Soon's Tracer quickly became famous for being able to back up a point after a fight is already over, earning him the name Sneaky Soon.
Using both support ultimates, but it proves to be successful, entering into the fight with Chips Hyan and the Valkyrie and getting the quick res onto XQC. And Soon backcaps it. That is...
All right.
You can't let that happen.
There were two key issues with this team, though. The first was in the flex DPS position. The team couldn't seem to decide whether they wanted Agilities or Silkthread on the role, and the two ended up splitting time on stage when it probably would have been better to commit to one at this point in the season. The second, something that as I'm going through SiR, I'm honestly surprised that I'm saying so much, is that the team didn't have a committed Mercy player. In Stage 1, Kariv and Unko were on stage a lot, but both of these players are known for their flex supports like Zenyatta, not their Mercy. Verbo, meanwhile, was a Lucio main, and Lucio mains generally haven't been able to translate to Mercy mains. While their Mercy struggles weren't quite as bad as some other teams, they still had some struggles. These issues, though, were really minor at this point. As the team impressed overall, they went 7-3 and just barely missed a playoff by a couple of maps. This team, people expected, would be strong going into the rest of the season. But then, Stage 2. It honestly kind of hurt to watch as the Valiant seemed to burn everything that they had built to the ground. Here's the thing with the Valiant. They are committed to being as transparent with the public as possible, and they were committed to a fault. Their Inside the Valiant series revealed that despite their strong performance in Stage 1, the team was going through some internal struggles, and most of the blame had fallen onto Cuddles, the longtime Immortals head coach, who transitioned over to the Valiant with the rest of the team. He was axed, and Moon, who had coached teams like Aradont and LW Red, joined up. Unfortunately, since he was in Korea, it took a while for him to be able to join the team. The team made some weird lineup choices too. In the battle for Flex DPS, it turns out neither Agility or Silkthread were winning. Instead, Kariv flexed over the DPS for a while to play mostly Widowmaker, which doesn't make much sense to me. Like, I get Kariv has played DPS in the past, but Shouldn't he be playing select support? Like, he is a flex support player for a reason, and Agilities and Silk Thread weren't doing that bad, so it's like, it was just really confusing. This forced Verbo to flex over to the main support roles, and while he did okay, the main focus was on Kariv. The experiment was a mixed bag. He started off looking really great, and then slowly started to become more pedestrian as it moved on. As this was happening, the most famous episode of Inside the Valiant was uploaded, and whoa! That's not a good ratio. The video did two things that were really bad. The first thing that they did was introduce us to the concept of their sister team.
So the sister team is basically the collective of the bench players, I guess. Until now, we were kind of just festering away on the bench doing nothing.
And since we have enough subs to make a roster, we decided it'd be better for those subs to make one team.
The sister team was basically all of the players that weren't on the starting roster. While the main roster would practice and scrim together, the sister team would do the same, completely segregated from the main team. Now, this idea seems to stem from the varsity versus junior varsity teams in high school athletics, with the two teams practicing separately from each other and playing teams of similar skill levels. The problem is that the sister team wasn't playing teams of similar skill levels. Valiant, why don't you have a contenders team? That is literally what a contenders team is for. Instead of giving the team the chance to compete at a tier 2 level, which is at least something, you've basically just confined them to playing ranked all day with each other. All of these players are the LA Valiant, not the LA Contenders team, and segregating them is not smart in case one of them needs to come up due to sickness or something. Like, you're not giving them any synergy with each other. The next issue was the issues of agilities. Apparently, according to the Inside the Valiant, when the new coach didn't fix things immediately, the Valiant looked for another scapegoat, and the blame fell onto agilities. For what reason? I don't know.
I think everyone expected things to just get better when we transitioned coaches, and didn't really understand that the problems with the team lay a lot deeper than that. I think some of the players on the team started looking at agilities as a problem to solve rather than as a teammate.
To the point where it was implied that this team was almost bullying him.
It was difficult for me at first because of how hard I've been working to keep my spot, and I had to deal with a lot of pressure and stress from the main roster guys, and just like I had to take a lot of criticism and a lot of feedback, and they didn't do it in the nicest way. So
the video ended with a meeting between CEO Noah Winston and Agilities in the car of a parking lot of an In-N-Out.
Like, he wants to spend a lot of time with you, like one-on-one, trying to give you that environment that you didn't have before. So you understand that you're going to have a shot at the main roster again.
Yeah.
But to be transparent with you, like, this is the shot, right?
Wow. First of all, I felt like Noah is trying way too hard to sound dramatic here. This doesn't feel like a team update. It sounds like a TV drama. And I ended up feeling just awkward to listen to. Secondly, even if Noah wasn't trying to be dramatic, there's no reason for them to use those kinds of conversations to be recorded and then uploaded for the world to see. All it's doing is causing unnecessary drama and villainizing your own organization and players in order to give Agility some kind of victim edit. This blunder of a video is why the Valiant for a time were the biggest memes alongside the Fuel and the Dragons, and why In-N-Out probably saw an uptick in sales afterwards. The team went 4-6 in Stage 2 as a result, and honestly looked seconds away from a complete internal collapse. Honestly, there's not really much to say about their performance on the field. They were all the same players, except, Kariv flexing on the flex DPS, but they were still all the same players, but something that had bound these players together in Stage 1 just wasn't there anymore, and they just looked terrible as a result. So, obviously, sometime between stages 2 and 3, the Valiant sat down and came to a consensus that something needed to change, and now. This is why in between stages 2 and 3, the Valiant made a flurry of moves, almost all at once, to be the most active team during the trading period. Alright, you ready? Okay, so the first thing they did was acquire Bunny, the rarely played Tracer specialist from the Soul Dynasty. They then made the only player-for-player trade in the Overwatch League, giving away to Unko to the Fuel for Custa. They dropped Envy, Grim Reality moved to an assistant coaching position, Silk Drake transferred to the Gladiators, and finally the team acquired KSF from Simplicity, FlimC from Vorgos and Hungry, and Izaki from NC Foxes! The Valiant had an obvious goal in mind. built a 12-man roster with 2 players at each of the 6 team slots. Bunny was meant to back up soon on hitscan DPS and provide a change of pace if needed on Tracer. This meant there was no room for Grim Reality, and he was moved to a coaching role since he wasn't really being played much anyways. Unko going off to the Fuel gave Kareev the full-time flex support slot, which was being contested, and Custa brought with him a good mercy and excellent leadership to compete with Verbo at main support. They actually tried to ship Soon and Unko together, but couldn't find any takers, so rest in peace to that. Envy was reportedly being toxic and lashed out at the team, though we have no actual proof of that, so they dropped him. Space, who was about to turn 18, would take his place. Finally, Finzi, KSF, and Izayaki were brought in to back up Space, Agilities, and Kareev, respectively. Okay, now we can finally talk about how the team did. They did really good. Custa's natural leadership gave this team a solid anchor to build around. Bunny was a terror to teams with his aggressive solo carry style of Tracer. Space filled in the off-tank slot like Envy never left. He may have actually been a little better. Agilities was back into the lineup full-time, and he looked sharp on Genji and Pharah. All of a sudden, the Valiant had turned their season around completely, making the playoffs with a 7-3 record and beaten by the XL. Still, compared to Stage 2, this was just amazing and almost a night and day sort of turnaround. Soon and Bunny are both known for their Tracer, so with Brigitte forcing her out of the meta, the team was forced into an interesting spot that exposed a weakness. The team didn't really have an elite Widowmaker, but dang, did Soon step up to the task. While he was new on the hero, or at least was much less experienced than most of the other Widowmaker specialists, he was very good at it, making the Widowmaker battles even. While I never really saw him win them resoundingly, he was consistently able to keep them close enough to let the rest of his team, namely Agilities, to pop off on Pharah or Genji. Both the Valiant or DPS are great, but unfortunately they're both prone to having maps or full games where they go completely silent. They were more on than off in Stage 4, but when they were off, you couldn't expect the Valiant to do very much. But in the case that they were off, the tank lines and supports were so great that it helped to cover up for it. The Valiant were getting it done, but it was rarely done in a very flashy way, which caused some alarm bells to ring in analysts and coaches who were expecting, like, these 3K Widowmaker highlight, special feed, whatevers, but it doesn't really matter. The Valiant were getting it done. The Valiant rode a 9-1 record to a 2nd place overall on the stage, beat the crosstown rival Gladiators, and stuck it to the Excelsior to become the only non-full Korean team to win a stage. The Valiant, as the title suggests, went from the meme to the dream, and were one of the most feared teams going into the playoffs. Where they then ran into the Spitfire. With a 2nd place finish overall, the Valiant were given a bye through the first round of the playoffs and ended up just getting squashed by a white-hot Spitfire team that had just finished a 6-0 thrashing of the Gladiators. Birdwing was all over the place, handing one of the biggest Widowmaker battle losses of his career to Soon. Agilities wasn't able to stand up to the incredible flexibility of Prophet. The tanks and supports tried their best, but the Valiant, I think, were just doomed by a Spitfire team that was already rolling at top speed after taking out the Gladiators. The Valiant took just one map off the Spitfire on their way to a semi-final exit, and there's really not much else to say. So, when you're stepping back and looking at the Valiant season as a whole, you can't forget the absolute disaster that was Stage 2 for this team. On and off the stage, this team was a complete mess, and looked to be on the brink of falling out of the running entirely, joining the likes of the Mayhem and the Dragons near the bottom of the standings. But the Valiant managed to put their pieces back together, move a lot of players around, reset, and succeed. They weren't flashy, but they got the job done. I'm not too sure if Soon is the guy for this team on Widowmaker, if she remains as integral as she is right now. There are definitely options for flashier players, but when you win the last stage of the Overwatch League, there's only so much complaining that I can do. That's why my final rating for the LA Valiant in Season 1 of the Overwatch League is a B+. Man, for some reason I could really go for some In-N-Out right now. That's it from me, guys. Until next time, don't get tilted. Peace nut.